Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another night of meditation and Dhamma talk here at Empty Cloud Monastery. I'm Anagarika Drew, and tonight we will be led in meditation by Bhante Suddhāso. Before that, though, let's say hi to each other. Greetings to Gita, hello, and Namo Buddhaya, right back to you, Jens. Hello, Nancy. Hello, Karen. Good to see you. Gita and Ron and Denise. Hello, hello, hello. And hello to you, Linda, as well. So, without further ado, almost missed you. Hello, I am Vimalanyani. It's a pleasure. And I will now pass on the baton to Bhante Suddhāso.
Thank you, Anagarika Drew. And welcome to everyone who's watching, and a special welcome to our venerable monastics who are tuning in. So you can start by getting in meditation posture. So getting in a stable, upright position. If possible, it's always best to sit in a cross-legged position with both knees touching the floor. So either the full lotus, half lotus, quarter lotus, or no lotus positions. Any of those are fine. As long as you're not crushing one foot under the opposite thigh. So as long as you're not cutting off the circulation to your feet or your ankles or your legs. Sitting with your pelvis tilted slightly forward so that your spine naturally comes into an upright position. Lifting your chest up and forward a bit and allowing your shoulders to swivel back and drip down your back. Bringing your hands together to rest gently together in your lap, with the thumbs lightly touching. The head resting evenly on the spine. With the chin tilted very slightly forwards, very slightly downwards. Just enough to open your airways in your throat to the maximum. And you can either close your eyes or let them rest unfocused, half open, pointed down at the ground about 1 or 2 meters in front of you. Bring a slight smile to your lips. And take a moment to just enjoy stillness. Just feeling the stillness of the body and appreciating the serenity, tranquility of not moving the body. The simple pleasure of not needing to do anything with the body. And appreciating not needing to do anything with the mind. So now that we're settling into meditation, there's nothing we need to think about. There's nothing we need to plan, nothing we need to remember. You can forget all those important things you've been trying to remember. Forget them. They're useless for the next period of time. You don't need to worry about what's going to happen tomorrow because today is not tomorrow. You don't need to worry about what happened yesterday because today is not yesterday. So there's nothing you need to think about, nothing you need to remember, nothing you need to plan. So just appreciate not needing to do anything with your mind or your body. And within that space of non-doing, you might notice that the mind tends to flail around, trying to find something to hold on to, something to do. So addicted to activity that even holding still for a few seconds is such a challenge. So as the mind flails about looking for something to hold on, let's give it something to hold on to. We'll give it the body. So choose a place in your body for the mind to hold on to. Perhaps the feeling of your hands touching in your lap. The mind can hold on there. Like if you're being swept away by a flood, and you come across a sturdy pole, something solid that you can hold on to make you feel safe, secure, as the water rushes past you. In the same way, we hold on to the body to give us a sense of stillness in the midst of chaos. So we still keep a broad, open awareness of all of our sensory fields, but we don't move the mind away from that place of safety. We keep the mind centered at the hands. And you can relax. Because as long as you keep holding on to the sensation of your body, you're safe. You can't get lost or swept away. So relax into the sense of security in stillness. Like when you're sitting inside a warm house with a full stomach, no problems, nothing missing, while a storm rages outside. But inside you're safe, secure. In the same way, we rest inside mindfulness of the body, our place of safety, of comfort, of ease. Untroubled by the raging storms of samsara. Keeping the mind alert and still. Just letting body and mind be completely still. Nothing to do, nowhere to go. You can relax your posture. Take a moment to appreciate the tranquility of the mind.
Sadhu, Bhante. Thank you so much. 1,000 gourmet meals cannot compare to a small taste of stillness. And hello to some new friends here. Kumu, welcome. Hello and good evening to you, Nicole. I'm afraid that's a name I can't read, but hello to you. Hello, Joy. Nice to see you. As well as you, Manuel and Angela. And you too, Mary. And Wang Wai Keong, pleasure. So tonight, Bhante Suddhāso will be giving us a talk on right attitude, or Sammā-Saṅkappa. And let's just go ahead and get started then.
Okay. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma-sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma-sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma-sambuddhassa. Buddhaṃ dhammāṃ saṅghāṃ namassāmi. So, good evening, friends. As mentioned this evening, I'll be speaking a bit about the second aspect of the Noble Eightfold Path, which in Pali is Sammā-Saṅkappa, translated here as right attitude. But first off, I'd like to just say a little bit about the importance of the Noble Eightfold Path. So briefly speaking, somebody recently was asking how you can tell whether or not something is a genuine Buddhist tradition. And there's a very simple way to tell. If a tradition teaches the entire Noble Eightfold Path in all of its details, as found in the suttas, then it's a Buddhist tradition. If a tradition is missing even part of one of the 8 aspects of the Eightfold Path, then it is not a Buddhist tradition. It is something inspired by Buddhism, perhaps. It might even be something that's very wholesome and very good, but it cannot be called a Buddhist tradition if it's missing even part of one of the 8 aspects of the Noble Eightfold Path. So it's very important to have a thorough understanding of the Noble Eightfold Path and all of its aspects and details. This evening we'll be focusing particularly on the second one. And the second aspect of the Noble Eightfold Path is actually quite important. I mean, they're all important. Every one of the 8 is important. But the second one holds particular importance as I see the path. Second in importance, perhaps only to the first aspect, which is right view, Sammā-Ditti. So Sammā-Saṅkappa. First off, looking at these 2 words, Sammā. There's a number of ways of translating this word. Most commonly, it's translated as right, in the sense of correct or proper or appropriate. And that's one translation, and that's a very useful translation, which is why it's the most common one. Sammā has a few other meanings as well. It also means complete or thorough. Sammā also means peaceful, from the root sam, which means peace. So Sammā also means that which is peaceful, which leads to peace, which is in accordance with peacefulness. That's one shade of meaning of the word Sammā, which I find very helpful to reflect on. All of the 8 aspects of the Noble Eightfold Path are peaceful, and they lead to peace. They conduce to true peace of mind, peace of heart for ourselves and others. Another aspect of the word Sammā, from the root sat. Sat has the meaning of true or good. So Sammā is also that which is true, that which is in line with truth, that which leads to truth. And it's also that which is good, that which is morally good. So the word Sammā carries all these wonderful connotations, which are important to keep in mind. So it's that which is correct, appropriate, complete, peaceful, true, and good. So we try to sum all of that up in the word right, but just keeping in mind this beautiful constellation of meanings to the word Sammā. Then the word Saṅkappa. The word Saṅkappa comes from the verb kappeti, which literally means prepare. So Saṅkappa is how you prepare your mind, which is why I say that it is second in importance, perhaps only to right view. So Sammā-Saṅkappa is how you prepare your mind for Buddhist practice, how you prepare your mind for the remaining 6 steps of the Noble Eightfold Path. So Sammā-Saṅkappa, I usually like to translate it as right attitude, but if you wanted to be a little more literal, you could translate it as right preparation, though it requires a bit too much explanation. Right preparation is perhaps a little too vague. Right attitude gets the meaning across more clearly. It's the attitude that we set in the mind in order to prepare it for Buddhist practice. You'll also commonly see it translated as right intention. That I'm a bit less fond of. There's another Pali word, cetana. Cetana more clearly means intention or volition. So I feel that translating Saṅkappa as intention is missing things a little bit, though that also captures some shade of this meaning of how we prepare the mind. Your intention is the preparation that you make in your mind before doing something. So in that sense, there's a similar meaning to attitude. You'll also sometimes see it translated as right thought. And this one also, I think, has some usefulness, but also some non-usefulness, in that Sammā-Saṅkappa is not necessarily about your thinking. It's not necessarily about verbal thinking or active thinking, but rather it's about the frame of mind, the attitude with which you approach all of the decisions that you make and all of the circumstances that you face. So for all these reasons, I like to use right attitude when using an English translation of Sammā-Saṅkappa. And the Buddha normally gives 3 basic aspects to Sammā-Saṅkappa. And again, all 3 of these are important. You can't diminish or leave out one of these 3. And the 3 he gives are Nekkhamma Saṅkappa, which is the attitude of renunciation; Avihimsa Saṅkappa, which is the attitude of non-harming or non-cruelty. Literally, it means non-injury. And the third one, Avyapada Saṅkappa. So the attitude of non-aversion, non-ill will, non-grumpiness. So these 3 attitudes, the first one is by far the most important. But the second 2 are easier to explain. So we're going to start with explaining the second 2. And then we'll spend some more time on the first one. So the attitude of non-harming and the attitude of non-aversion. These are closely related, as I hope is relatively clear. And they're often presented as being another way of saying karuna and metta. So karuna is compassion, which is the wish for beings to be free from harm, free of suffering. And metta is the wish for beings to be happy. So this is the opposite of wishing for beings to be harmed, which would be vihimsa saṅkappa, so wishing for beings to be harmed, and having hostility and aversion and ill will towards beings. That'd be vyapada. So the opposite of wishing for beings to be harmed is wishing for beings to be free of harm, which is compassion, karuna. And the opposite of being grumpy and hostile and irritable towards living beings is being kind and loving and friendly toward living beings, which is metta. So we talk about metta and karuna, so loving kindness and compassion. We talk about them all the time. So I'm not going to spend much time on those this evening, but just emphasizing that this is a fundamental part of the Noble Eightfold Path. So every now and then you'll hear people say utterly ridiculous things like, you don't need compassion to attain awakening, you just need wisdom. Well, that's utterly ridiculous, isn't it? Because loving kindness and compassion are 2 aspects of Sammā-Saṅkappa, 2 aspects of right attitude. Which means that if you cut them out, then you no longer have the Noble Eightfold Path. You have the almost Noble Sevenfold Path, which is not going to lead you to enlightenment. It might get you relatively close, but in order to get all the way, you need all 8 parts of the Noble Eightfold Path. Kind of like if somebody asks you for a cat, and you bring them 7/8 of a cat, and you're like, here's your cat. They'll be like, I don't think you quite got the point when I asked for a cat. I asked for 100% of a cat, not 7/8 of a cat. 7/8 of a cat will not serve the purpose of a cat. You need the whole thing. So in the same way, 7/8 of a path to enlightenment does not lead to enlightenment. We need the whole package. So loving kindness and compassion are critical elements of Buddhist practice. Recently, a teacher who shall remain unnamed, recently an unnamed teacher said, compassion is just a meditation method for developing samadhi. Again, I don't know where people get these crazy ideas because it's not from the suttas. It's not from the Buddha's teachings. So let's just be clear on that. Compassion is not just a meditation method for developing concentration. Compassion is a fundamental attitude of mind which should inform every choice we make and influence how we approach every circumstance we're in. So it's, again, it's not some cute add-on, a little bit of frosting that you put on your Vipassana cake. It's a fundamental part of the recipe. And it's also a very powerful way of eroding self-attachment, which is ultimately what Buddhist practice is all about. Buddhist practice is all about eroding our self-attachment. It's about eliminating, at the lower stages, it's about eliminating Sakkaya Ditthi, so the viewpoint of personal identity. So attachment to who we think we are. And at the higher level, it's about eroding asmimana, which is the conceit of belief in self-existence. So if we're so fixated on me, and myself, and mine, and my practice, and what I want for myself in my life, if we're so fixated on me all the time, to the point where we have no interest in helping other people, being of benefit to others, supporting others, caring about others, then we will not even attain the first stage of awakening, let alone full enlightenment. So compassion, once again, is not just something you do if you feel like it, like a little bit of bonus extra credit when you're getting tired of just noting all the time. But it is a fundamental element of the path to awakening. And again, I don't make these things up. It's all throughout the Buddhist teachings. It's all throughout the suttas. So loving kindness and compassion are both critical elements of right attitude, Sammā-Saṅkappa. And the other aspect, which is the first in the list of three, is renunciation, nekkhamma. And this, again, is not something which can be skipped around or danced around or set aside. In fact, it's right at the heart of the Buddhist teachings. So many people are aware that one of the most concise explanations of Buddhist doctrine is the Four Noble Truths. The first Noble Truth is that there is suffering. There is dukkha. The second Noble Truth is that dukkha is caused by desire and attachment. The third Noble Truth is that when we relinquish desire and attachment, then we are relinquishing dukkha. We attain freedom from suffering. We attain full enlightenment. Isn't that interesting? Relinquishment, renunciation, is the key to enlightenment. So once again, nekkhamma, renunciation, it's not just something that only those weird guys in funny robes do. Renunciation is not something which only self-torturing people who live in monasteries do. Renunciation is a central component of Buddhist practice. And without renunciation, once again, you will not attain even the first stage of awakening. In fact, without some degree of renunciation, you can't even get good concentration in your meditation practice. This might be one of the reasons why samadhi went out of favor in many Buddhist circles about 150 years ago. Started to occur to people that they would have to practice some renunciation if they wanted to get good concentration. So then they invented this idea that you don't need concentration to attain enlightenment. You only need insight. Once again, I don't know how people make these things up because you can't find it anywhere in the Buddhist teachings. Once again, Sammā-Samadhi is one of the 8 parts of the Noble Eightfold Path. So when you cut out renunciation, well, you're cutting out Sammā-Saṅkappa, cutting out samadhi, you're cutting out Sammā-Samadhi. Now you're only down to 6 out of 8 parts. This is getting pretty dodgy. So you're down to only 3/4 of a cat, which even less useful than 7/8 of a cat. So, nekkhamma, renunciation. What is it? What are we talking about when we talk about renunciation? Well, one way of talking about it is about contentment. Contentment with what? Contentment with not having anything at all. Some people talk about renunciation as being contentment with the bare minimum, but even that's a problem because there's some attachment there, isn't there? There's attachment to having the bare minimum, which means that if at some point you don't have whatever you think the bare minimum is, then you will suffer, which means you are not free of self-attachment. You're not free of self-obsession. You're not free of desire. You'll just keep spinning around and circle after circle after circle through samsara. So contentment with not having anything at all, not even whatever you think your basic needs are. I remember one time when I was living at a monastery in California. And at that monastery, it was the standard practice that once a week we would all stay up all night meditating. But then the next day you could sleep in late if you wanted to, which of course you wanted to, most people. And one day I had done the usual all-night sitting and I was sleeping in late as usual. And I'd forgotten to set my alarm. So I woke up at 11:30 and lunch was at 11. And I panicked and I freaked out and I threw my robes on and started rushing down the hill towards the dining hall. But of course I was way too late. And I showed up and lunch was already over. So I suddenly came face to face with the fact that I was not going to get anything to eat that day. So you could say then that I had to come face to face with the facts that for that day, not even my basic needs were going to be met. And I had to learn how to be okay with that. Can I be okay with not even getting my basic needs? Turns out the answer was yes. Totally fine. After the initial minutes of panic, of course, turns out it was fine. So if renunciation means being okay with not even getting our basic needs met, how much more so does it mean being okay with not getting a nice car, not getting a romantic partner, not getting respected? Ouch, how about that one? Not getting respected, not getting kindness, not getting fair treatment. Not getting health, not getting longevity. All of that stuff is not needed. You don't need a nice car. You don't need a romantic partner. You don't need to be respected. You don't need to be famous. You don't need to have a lot of money. Technically, you don't need money at all. So whatever you think you need, recognize that you can be perfectly happy without it. You'll also start to realize that most of what you think you need is actually just stuff that you want. You really don't need much. We need very little to get by. Some food, some water, protection from extremes of weather. That's about it. That's about all you really need. And we need to learn how to be content with not even getting that. Content with being hungry, content with being thirsty, content with being too cold or too hot, content with sunburn, content with getting attacked by insects. Learning how to be content with anything that comes. Learning how to be content with the entire miserable mass of samsara. And interestingly enough, that's when you start to break free of it. because it no longer has any grip on you, no longer has any way to spin you out or get you stuck. So it just flows past you without sticking. And renunciation is also an attitude. It's the willingness to let go of whatever we encounter, the willingness to let go of every object, every possession, every thought, every idea, every experience, every emotion, every person, every friend, every relative, every pet, every memory. Absolutely everything, being willing to let go of it. Because whatever we're not willing to let go of, that will inhibit our awakening. Whatever we're not willing to let go of, that will inhibit the development of wisdom. It will inhibit the development of happiness. It will inhibit the development of wholesome states of mind. So another way of talking about renunciation is the willingness to let go of absolutely everything. No exceptions. Doesn't mean you need to get up from this talk and go and throw all your things in the dumpster, though that's probably not a bad idea. Just be perfectly realistic here. Probably not a bad idea. Keep a couple changes of clothing, but the rest you can just go and throw in the dumpster. Or even better, give it to charity. That doesn't mean you need to do that, but you need to be willing to do that without the slightest tinge of regret, without the slightest disappointment in your mind. And this, of course, is one of the reasons why we have monastic life in Buddhism. And what is monastic life? Monastic life is an attempt to fully embody renunciation. That's what it is, fundamentally. It's what monastics are. We're walking, living embodiments of renunciation. In theory, of course, most monastics are not enlightened, so most of us still have some measure of attachments, which means we're not perfect at this whole renunciation thing yet, but we're trying. We're trying to live a life which is characterized by complete renunciation, which is one of the reasons why monasticism has been a critical central component of Buddhism since day one, and continues to be entirely necessary and relevant to this day, and for the entire lifespan of the Buddha Sasana, for the entire lifespan of Buddhism. So again, this is why at the beginning when I said that one of the basic ways of telling what's a Buddhist tradition and what isn't is whether or not it's upholding the entire Noble Eightfold Path. So if a tradition rejects the value of monasticism, then it's not Buddhist. Because that means that there's a fundamental failure to understand what renunciation is. Fundamental failure to understand the value of renunciation. Which means there's a fundamental failure to understand the Four Noble Truths. These are not separable. To reject Buddhist monasticism is to reject the Four Noble Truths. Which means you're not Buddhist. Might be doing something good in the world, might be doing something beneficial, it's just not Buddhist. So Sammā-Saṅkappa, again, has these three aspects. So nekkhamma, renunciation, the attitude of willingness to let go of all things, all experiences, all ideas, all memories, all perceptions, all states of consciousness, all self-identities, all of it. The willingness to let go of all sankharas, all phenomena, without exception. And Avihingsa-Saṅkappa, so the attitude of non-harming, non-cruelty, non-injury, the attitude fundamentally of compassion, wishing for all beings to be free of harm. And Avyāpada-Saṅkappa, the attitude of non-aversion, non-ill will, non-irritability. So, in other words, the full embracing and acceptance of all beings, warm-heartedness and kindness towards all beings, recognizing that all beings have their place within samsara. Every being is equally valid as every other. So these are three critical attitudes that we bring to our practice. So the attitude of loving kindness and compassion are necessary in order to properly practice right speech, right action, right livelihood. So the external moral practices of Buddhism. And it's also important for the development of right effort. So abandoning unwholesome mind states, which includes aversion, cultivating wholesome mind states such as loving kindness. It's great for mindfulness as well, because when our mind is filled with aversion, it's actually not a very pleasant place to be, not a very nice thing to be aware of. Whereas the mind of metta is a delightful thing to be aware of, delightful to be mindful of. And of course, freedom from aversion is critical for samadhi. If the mind is filled with aversion, if it has even traces of aversion, then you cannot enter first jhana. So the mind must be free of aversion if we wish to enter jhana. Similarly, the mind of compassion is necessary. In the same way, it's necessary for the next 6 steps of the Eightfold Path. And the mind of renunciation also is necessary. So right action, right speech, right livelihood, they all necessitate renouncing, giving up, relinquishing, letting go of wrong action, wrong speech, wrong livelihood. Right effort requires the willingness to relinquish and renounce and give up, let go of unwholesome mind states. However much we might cherish and love them, we have to give them up because they're an impediment to true happiness. They're an obstacle on the path to wisdom. Right mindfulness means we have to give up wrong mindfulness. It means we have to give up spaciness. We have to give up distraction and dullness, which again has a certain soporific pleasantness to it. But without right mindfulness, we're not getting anywhere closer to awakening. And of course, renunciation is critical for samadhi. In order to enter deep samadhi, then we have to give up physical movement, and we have to give up mental movement, and we have to give up the 5 hindrances. So that's all a function of renunciation. So if you can't give up your romantic partner, if you can't give up your television shows, if you can't give up your luxury clothing, what on earth makes you think you're going to give up the hindrances to samadhi? What on earth makes you think you're going to give up the hindrances to wisdom? What makes you think you're going to give up the hindrances to enlightenment? There's no hope. Literally, none. Without renunciation, you're not going to get even remotely close to enlightenment. You're just going to keep spinning around in samsara for one painful life after another. That's it. Again, it blows my mind how many supposedly Buddhist teachers there are these days who say that renunciation is not necessary. When the more one reads the suttas, the more it becomes crystal clear, undeniably obvious that renunciation is not an important part of the Buddhist path. Renunciation is the Buddhist path. Renunciation is not some cute extra credit add-on that those weirdo monks do. Renunciation is the path to enlightenment. And so this is why throughout Buddhist history, it's just been taken as a given that if somebody really wants to attain enlightenment, that they'll become a monastic. Of course. Because monasticism is renunciation, and Buddhism is renunciation. So of course, if somebody gets really, really serious about Buddhism, they're going to try to become a monastic. Or at the very least, they'll become very respectful of monasticism. They'll have a deep sense of the value and importance of monasticism. Even if they feel like they're not going to do it in this life, they'll have a deep appreciation for the people who do, because they'll know that those people are embodying the Buddhist teachings. Trying to, anyway. So, again, asking ourselves, do we want a cat or do we want 7/8 of a cat? 6/8 of a cat, 5/8 of a cat, 4/8 of a cat, 3/8 of a cat, 2/8 of a cat, 1/8 of a cat? Is that what we want? Or do we want the entire living, breathing, healthy cat? I don't want 7/8 of a cat in my room. I want a living, breathing, healthy cat in my room. In the same way, I don't want some dismembered fragment of the Buddhist teachings. I want the whole thing. I want the living, breathing, vitality-infused, complete path that leads all the way to full enlightenment. And that means it's got to have renunciation. It's got to have compassion, and it's got to have loving kindness. So, here we are. What are we going to do with this? The Buddha was an utterly uncompromising teacher. And that was because he saw that if you start compromising with your defilements, then you break the path to awakening. So let's not compromise. When it comes to Dhamma, let's not compromise one bit. So it's actually fine. It's fine if you say, oh, well, I can't quite bring myself to do this whole renunciation thing. That's fine. You can say that. As long as you don't say that it isn't necessary, then there's a problem. But you can say, oh, renunciation is amazing. I respect it. I value it. I'm not doing it, but I think it's great that other people are. I think it's great because that's what's necessary for enlightenment. I'm not doing it, but I'm happy that other people are working on it. Or you might say, yeah, I'm a grumpy, irritable person who hates everyone. It's true. And I'm not really doing too much about it. That's also true. And therefore, I'm not going to attain enlightenment anytime soon. Also true. But it's good that some other people are working on loving kindness and compassion, because then they might attain enlightenment. And that would be great for them. It would be a wonderful thing. So being honest, being realistic with ourselves. Am I practicing right attitude as the Buddha taught it? Am I trying to develop renunciation, compassion, and loving kindness? Am I trying? If the answer is yes, that's great. Keep it up. If the answer is no, well, first off, be honest with yourself that the answer is no. And acknowledge that the Noble Eightfold Path continues to be exactly what the Buddha taught it to be. And rewriting the Noble Eightfold Path to justify our own defilements does not help us. In fact, it harms us. Because we can convince ourselves that we don't need to work on the things that we need to work on. And it harms others, because if we spread that wrong view through the world, then there are others who will not know what they need to work on. There are others who will not know what needs to be done to attain awakening. So it's perfectly fine to tell yourself, yeah, I'm not so good at this whole right attitude thing. As long as you're clear about what right attitude is. and you're clear with others what right attitude is. Once again, it's renunciation. The willingness to let go of absolutely everything. And when one practices right attitude, at some point you wind up knocking on the door of a monastery, whether in this life or in a future life. There's no getting around it. And it means developing compassion and loving kindness, which means changing how we think, changing how we speak, changing how we act, changing how we vote, to make it kinder, to see what we can do to reduce the suffering of others. Because this is an integral part of the path to awakening. Again, there's no getting around it. And in fact, if we're trying to get around it, that's because we don't yet understand the Buddha's teachings. So I think I've said more than enough on the topic of right attitude. Probably also angered a few people along the way, which is great because that means you've gotten a little glimpse at your own defilements. And most importantly, I hope I've also instilled in you some inspiration to value and respect and practice these three aspects of right attitude, because they do lead inevitably towards awakening when part of the Noble Eightfold Path. Thank you. Sadhu, 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 anumodani. And at this time, if you have any questions, please feel free to type them in and I'll answer to the best of my abilities.
Great, indeed. Sadhu, Bhante. Thank you. And we do have at least one question I've seen, but first, hello, Amaranta, and hello, Melinda and Alexandra, Gita, Yudi, Elaine. It's okay to be late. Nice to have you. And all right, the first question here, if I'm not mistaken, is from Angela. Also, hello to you, Angela.
Is this the Angela who is here for the Day of Mindfulness?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, great.
Oh, also, hello to everyone on Instagram. So Angela writes, Bhante, when I look back at history, I find it ironic that most leaps in innovation were driven by discontent and suffering. Great inventors, writers, Nobel Prize winners, etc., seem to have been driven by attachment to an ideal or fame or hope. Do you think if we all lost attachment to happiness and the conditions that make it easier to be happy, that the world might actually suffer more? You always have great answers to alleviate my concerns like the above, so I'm eager to hear your thoughts. Thank you, Bhante.
Well, first off, that will never happen. In the sense that there's really no chance that everybody in the world is going to commit to practicing non-attachment and renunciation. That's just not going to happen. Even in intensely devout Buddhist countries, it doesn't happen. So realistically, that scenario is just never going to come to be. It's a dream scenario. But if it did come to be, it would actually be a wonderful thing because everyone would be really happy. Would there be less technological advances? Yeah, that's true, but everyone would be really happy. Would there be less progresses in manufacturing clothing? Well, yeah, but that's fine because everyone would be really happy. Would there be fewer chemical manufacturing plants in the world? Well, yeah, and that'd be fine because everyone would be really happy. Would we abandon our Mars exploration program? Oh, almost certainly. But that would be okay because everyone would be really happy. Are you getting the pattern here yet? Why do people do all those other things? Because they think it will make them happy, and it doesn't. So they do more stuff, thinking that will make them happy, and it doesn't. So they do more stuff, thinking that will make them happy, and it doesn't. Repeat, 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 repeat. And then the Buddha comes along and he's like, hey, yo, y'all can just be happy right now. And people are like, that's crazy talk, man. Yeah, no, I'm going to skip on that. And I'm going to go off and invent something. And it doesn't make them happy. So they keep inventing new stuff and they're still not happy. There's no end to it. There's no end to inventing things and trying to progress science and technology and all that. There's no end. And it will never make you happy, ever. So, and I like technology. It's great. It's a really useful tool. But it doesn't bring happiness in and of itself. So this is one of the great lies of the modern era. And actually, it's not new to the modern era. It's been around for as long as there's been humans, which is forever, by the way. It's this great lie that progress equals happiness. Material prosperity equals happiness. It's complete falsehood. Contentment equals happiness. That's a true statement. Okay?
All right. Thank you, Bhante. And Amaranta asks, when you are afraid, you can develop aversion to the person you think will harm you. How do you deal with that?
One thing that's really helpful whenever dealing with anybody who has defilements, including defilements that make them dangerous to you, is reflect on the fact that that person is suffering. And wish for them to be free of their suffering. So currently their suffering is manifesting as wanting to harm you. And that's sad. That's really sad. But fundamentally, they're suffering. And their suffering is so bad that they're actually trying to take it out on somebody else. That's so sad. So you wish for them to be happy and free of suffering, because then not only would they be happy, but they would also stop inflicting harm on other people. Okay? And as for fear, fear is something which naturally starts falling away as one progresses in Buddhist practice. Because as we progress in Buddhist practice, we become increasingly aware that whatever experience happens, we will be able to face it with serenity, with equanimity, with a stable, non-reactive mind. So we know that no matter what somebody does to us, we can endure it peacefully. That doesn't mean you should, by the way. Sometimes you should run as fast as you can in the opposite direction. In fact, if you can, that's recommended. But if you can't escape, then you will endure with a peaceful mind. So as your Buddhist practice develops, then you start to build up this confidence in your ability to peacefully endure any experience, any situation, no matter how ghastly or horrifying it would normally be. And with that comes a sense of fearlessness. Okay?
All right. And then we have a question here on Instagram.
Okay.
Trip Jules says, I thought tanha was translated to thirst or craving, not desire, and in conjunction to it. Well, what about the desire to awaken?
So this is one of those questions that we get asked about 100 times every month. I would actually recommend that you bring that to Monk Chat tomorrow evening. Probably a better time for that. But just to give you a very brief answer, the desire to attain awakening is the desire that leads to the ending of all desires. And it is the only desire that has that quality to it. Okay?
Bouncing off the Monk Chat idea. Artistic landscaping, I would also probably bring your question tomorrow at 7:30 p.m. New York City time. All right. And Bernadette says, I think this sounds extremist and contradictory. On one hand, there's a message of loving kindness. On the other, there's a sort of a rigid, judgmental undertone.
Yeah, I don't understand what you mean. So maybe if you could clarify what you mean, then I can help to illuminate this for you.
All right, thank you. And Original Mind says, can one reach unbinding as a non-monastic?
So I assume by unbinding you mean liberation or full enlightenment. Is it possible as a non-monastic? Theoretically, yes. Practically, almost zero chance. Very slightly higher than zero chance, but very close to zero. And the reason for this is that attaining full enlightenment requires complete renunciation. So very rarely does somebody jump directly from complete attachment and obsession directly to complete renunciation. Usually it's a gradual development, a gradual progress that happens over the course of many, many years, many decades, many lifetimes. And at some point during the development of the practice of renunciation, at some point one naturally tends to become interested in monastic life. And monastic life seems like a natural step for one who is deeply interested in renunciation. So naturally one then tends to wind up becoming a monastic. Also, one will tend to seek out monastic life because monastic life is a great support for practicing renunciation. It's much easier to practice renunciation as a monastic than as a layperson. So that's another reason why one will normally wind up becoming a monastic somewhere along the path of developing complete renunciation. So it is theoretically possible for a non-monastic to attain full enlightenment. It's just exceedingly rare. And realistically, somewhere along the path, you'll wind up just becoming a monastic because at some point, it just makes sense. It's just a natural next step. And usually where this question is coming from, by the way, is somebody who is a layperson and is deeply attached to certain characteristics and qualities of being a layperson. And they're not willing to renounce those characteristics and qualities of a layperson. Usually that's where this question is coming from. And also remember, if you're currently in the status of a layperson, that's not a permanent state. That's just what you're doing right now. So it's not like if you're currently a layperson that means you will never attain enlightenment. That's not true. It just means that realistically, you're probably going to switch to the status of monastic sometime before you attain enlightenment, probably quite a long time before you attain enlightenment. Okay?
Great. And Anita says, does compassion and loving kindness also mean towards ourselves as well? And how do we balance renunciation with loving kindness and compassion, Bhante?
So yes, compassion and loving kindness are without distinction of separate beings in its highest form. So that naturally includes yourself because it's not making any distinctions between self and other. This is another reason why the practices of loving kindness and compassion help us to realize anatta, not self. Because at the highest levels of loving kindness and compassion, there is no concept of self and other. There's no concept of me and you. There's only universal compassion. As for your second question, balancing renunciation with loving kindness and compassion, was that the question?
Mm-hmm.
Honestly, I don't understand what you're asking because I don't see these as being in any way contradictory. In fact, I see them as being mutually supportive. So I don't see it as needing to balance them against each other because they both uplift and support each other. Yeah, The more you practice renunciation, the more you care about others. And the more you care about others, the easier it is to practice renunciation. So I don't see these as being contradictory or contrary qualities at all. That might actually make the great subject of a talk sometime. How does compassion and renunciation support each other? Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah. Anything else?
We do. Yeah, we do. Yeah.
Do we have many other things? Do I need to give shorter answers?
Actually, no. I think we have enough time for the following questions. Good evening, Venerables. Bhante, I have a chronic illness, and when you said we need to be okay with that health, it was very impactful for me. But the concern comes up of if, when my health suffers, so does my practice. My mind is not as clear, and my meditation seems to suffer when I'm feeling ill. So it causes me to hold tight to my health for the sake of my practice. Do you have any guidance?
Yeah, that's actually quite appropriate. It's true. It's easier to practice well when you're healthy. So yeah, try to stay healthy. Keeping in mind that the reason you're trying to stay healthy is because it supports your practice. But also recognizing that health is impermanent. It's not reliable. So you also need to learn how to be okay with when you're not so healthy. And learn how to keep your practice going strong even when you're not so healthy. Because sometimes that will be the state of things. And you need to learn how to make even the states of sickness be a support to your path. Okay.
All right, and two more questions here. Yudi says, I'm experiencing strong aversion towards the people above my apartment. They purposely make noises and follow me around my apartment 24 hours a day. I see it as Dharma practice to be okay with aversion, but I can't still my mind.
Practice metta. Yuri, I've known you for years now. Metta, 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 metta. Every single day. You should do at least 1 hour of metta meditation every single day. Trust me, you'll feel 1,000,000 times better in a couple months. Okay, next question.
All right. And let me see. Andrew here says, when one has failed and given in to the push of their kilesas, how does one best push with right effort to do better without descending into morbid, quote, self-reflection?
Well, actually, I would say the very first thing is to forgive yourself. So acknowledge that it's actually perfectly normal and perfectly natural that you gave into your kilesas. Of course. Of course it's natural. Of course it's normal. You have incredibly strong, unwholesome habits that you've been building up over countless billions of lifetimes. Of course you're going to give in to those habits. Frequently. Of course. Totally normal. So forgive yourself. Acknowledging and understanding that you're deeply addicted to your defilements, just like I am. Just like pretty much every unenlightened being is. And that means you're going to screw up a lot. In fact, you're going to screw up most of the time. So it's really important to approach Buddhist practice with the mind of a realist who says, I am really bad at Buddhism. And I'm going to continue being really bad at Buddhism for a long time. And that's okay, because the Buddha used to be really bad at it too. But he stuck with it, and gradually, over time, gradually he got better and better and better and better and better and better. And look how he turned out. We can be the same. At one point, the Buddha was just as messed up as we are now. But he set himself on getting better, and he got better. In fact, he got all the way better and attained full enlightenment. We can do it too. It's going to take time. So forgive yourself. Have compassion for yourself, this poor, foolish, self-torturing, delusional being here. Have compassion for this being. Forgive them, and point them back towards the path. gently, and start again. Okay?
Great. All right, then. So that about wraps things up here. We have one more question, but not quite enough time for it. So, Nancy, please bring your question tomorrow at 7:30 p.m. at Monk Chat. But yes, Anjalis are all over the place. Flowers, smiles, people thankful for the Dhamma. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. In fact, why don't we give a few sadhus before we say goodnight?
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Okay, see you next time.